everybody. Welcome back to the show, Science Dispatch Podcast. My name is Cameron English. I am joined, as always, by Dr. Chuck Dinnerstein, Director of Medicine at the American Council on Science and Health. Chuck, how are you this lovely afternoon?
I'm very happy. I'm happy to be here. Happy to see your smiling face once again.
I'm also feeling that way. Thank you very much, Dr. Dinnerstein. I noticed you're rocking the tie-dye today, and I got to say, it's a good look. It's a very good look for you.
It's very, very retro. Very retro to me.
Yeah. I did
my wasted youth.
I didn't think of it. You came up with it, but the idea of a small ponytail emanating out of the back of your head, that's all you're missing, man. And then you're
And I have to report, at one time I did have the ponytail during medical school. I had a ponytail, but somewhere between the end of the third year and the first day of residency, the ponytail disappeared.
Yeah. Probably
not to be seen.
Probably for the best.
But it's still inside internally. It's still in there.
I'm sure some of your patients would have seen that when, nope, this guy can't possibly be a good physician.
No.
Okay.
Nobody wants a surgeon with a ponytail. I don't care what they
You know what? And I sort of respect that. You know, it's a bit of stigmatizing, but I think I share that. I don't want to see a surgeon with a ponytail. There's just something off-putting. Anyways, let's get into our story for the day. Chuck, this is I want to say a very clever study design and an interesting question that they're looking at. And your write-up was also really helpful. So your story is called, Should Syncing Up Replace Hooking Up? Let me read this introduction here, and then you can take it away. So you write, in the dance of human interaction, being in sync might be more than just a metaphor. Humans, like all biological beings, have inherent rhythms. A new study explores the link between synchronization and social behavior, suggesting that those who can synchronize well may also be perceived as more attractive. What a fascinating proposition, Chuck. Just explain what's going on here.
Okay, so we are social creatures, irrespective of the politics at the moment. We are social creatures. And there's any number of very fascinating underlying neurologic qualities that we have. Now, whether the neurologic qualities came first or the socialization came first, I'm not there to say. But they're there. And the typical example that we can begin with are the concept of mirror neurons. And mirror neurons are neurons that fire when we carry out doing something like digging a little bit of a hole. These neurons will fire. Now, when we see somebody digging a hole again, those same neurons fire. And neurologists believe that this has a lot to do with how we develop empathy and feelings for one another. And it's very much mirror neurons are at the bottom of the pile when we talk about monkey see, monkey do. They've carried this work along for a long time, and I've written about these ideas of synchronizations in the past. You all get the idea that when we go to a concert, everybody gets into the music and everybody begins to synchronize with the rhythms. And as it turns out, we sync. Yeah, that's it. We don't have, nobody can see you light your lighter there, but we all begin to synchronize with the rhythms in more than just moving our bodies. Our heart rates all begin to synchronize to that rhythm, and that's what they explored in this study. And what they were interested in is whether this ability to synchronize was a general quality or not. And they were interested in whether synchronization had anything to do with romance and long-term relationships, because, well, having been married far longer than you, can tell you that my wife will finish many of my sentences. In fact, my wife will tell me many of my thoughts. That's how synchronized we are. But nonetheless, they began the study by looking to see whether two actors that were acting in synchrony, filling in sentences for one another, having similar facial relationships, similar gestures, were viewed as more romantic than two actors that were acting asynchronously. And indeed, couples that were acting synchronously were viewed as more romantically paired. They then went on to try an experiment to see what would happen in the real world and here's where my age shows again, because I don't really understand speed dating that well. But they did an experiment with speed dating, which for the rest of the elderly in the group is a time when people get together and they spend 5 minutes talking to one another and come to a snap decision about whether they wish to see that person again. It's kind of a variation, I think, on the dating game from my generation. In any case, they looked at the synchrony of these individuals in two ways. They measured the amount of sweat they produce, which is a reasonable measure of autonomic function, and they wanted to see how many of these people paired up in terms of increasing autonomic function when they talked to one another, and that gave them a sense of how synchronous the two individuals were with one another. And then in the second related part of the experiment, they also asked these people to simply tap their finger in time with a metronome that kept changing its rhythm. And they used that as a general measure of how well they can synchronize with things in general in the world. And what they found was that people that were synchronous were more inclined to begin to date one another than people that were not asynchronous. This was not based on just that initial evaluation, but it was something, the synchrony between their physiology began about 2 minutes into the conversation. And that there was an additional group of people that they described as super synchronators that just had an innate ability to synchronize with the people around them. And they posited that these were the kind of people that we would think of as the movers and shakers in society. And so I thought that was a very fascinating kind of look at how we develop relationships, because as it began, we're all social beings. So it's interesting to get a sense of what's underlying that social ability.
You know, the mention of metronomes and your anecdote about concerts strikes me as compelling as a musician, because I see examples of that all around me. So for example, if you go to a concert where the music is deliberately in an odd time signature, it's not, you can dance to it, but it doesn't have that kind of rhythmic four count that people really rely on when they listen to the radio. And you can see if somebody's watching a band like that and they're trying to dance or they're trying to headbang or something, there's a visible discomfort sometimes, because they're trying to they're like, I can't find the one. Where's the one? I can't, you know what I mean? And it's, unless you go into that context knowing that's what's going to happen and you get some kind of entertainment out of that. Like you go to a Rush concert and you're like, I really like Rush because they have these really long, elaborate songs. If you don't go in thinking that, you go, this just feels weird. I don't feel in sync, right? So it seems that they may be onto something. Maybe, I know you talk about, taking these results carefully and really thinking through them and making sure they're replicated and so forth. But it seems like they might have identified something here. What do you think?
Oh, I definitely think that they're onto something here, and that I find it fascinating how the mind-body connections become stronger and stronger as we delve more and more into it. The fact that we've seen in the past where, with Match.com, and the people that have studied that can show these changes in a person's posture and person's facial gestures and people's phrasing as they become closer to one another, and then to begin to find some kind of underlying physiology that explains it, I think is fantastic. And then the other place, and I am not a musician, though I do love music, has been in looking at musicians and how, particularly in jazz, the people that can do these long riffs will just make some very small changes in the synchronicity. But they maintain the overall synchronicity, but they punctuate it in their own stylistic way that brings the audience along, and you can see it in their heart rates, and you can see it in all the craziness from a Taylor Swift concert. It's amazing to think that in many ways their hearts are beating as one, and how powerful that is in any number of realms. To wander off just to a political version, and we'll take one from a long time ago, Leni Riefenstahl and the Third Reich. She knew how to put on a show. They knew how to put on a show. And that, and I think that they intuitively made use of a lot of these things that get that drive our social ability as social creatures. So obviously you can drive them for good or bad. Okay, perhaps that wasn't the best example, but
Well, it is a fascinating example. I think that film you're talking about is called Triumph of the Will, and it's
Yes, it
pure
is.
and utter propaganda, and it's footage of the Nuremberg rallies when the Nazis first came to power, and it's interesting to study because you can see. And it's in black and white, so it's like it's harder to pick up on than it would be with a modern film. But you can see the dynamics that would bring people to go along with something that's truly putrid and evil, because there's this rhythm, and you're like, oh, this is what we do. This is our thing, right? We are the people, right? And pretty soon,
Well, if you think about it in that sense, if you can get everybody's heart beating as one for some music, they're going to come away with a good vibe feeling about all the people that were in attendance.
very good point.
So I think that that's part and parcel of how it is that we find ourselves in these places. And again, it's an interesting thing generationally that you stop listening to music sometime in your 20s, and then everything after that is garbage.
That is a real phenomenon. The very mention of Taylor Swift makes me convulse just briefly. I think you're right. It took longer for me, but I'm definitely hitting a hard point where I'm like, do I really need the new stuff? I don't know. So,
Oh no, yeah. My Spotify list, there's, I'm surprised they're not scratchy 45s.
yeah.
All were remastered in 1983.
Yeah. Incidentally, I did start buying vinyl recently. It's a thing. Middle age comes for us all. It's coming, everybody. Just embrace it. Okay, final science question as we wrap up here. And we have to be careful because it's very tempting to sort of tell a just so story from an evolutionary perspective. So the dumbest one I've heard is that, we glommed onto gold as a money because it glistens in the sun just like water, and we need water to survive. So other things that glisten make us, attract us as well. That seems a bit of a stretch to me, to put it politely. But in this case, and I think you mentioned this in the story, being in sync with another member of your tribe when you're trying to evade a wild animal that wants to eat you, that would serve a very important purpose. And of course, being in sync with a romantic partner would facilitate pair bonding and reproduction, which obviously is important to humans. Yes. What do you make of that sort of approach to this issue?
I think it's an intriguing idea, but I don't know that it ultimately gets us further along. I think that the advantage is seeing that there are these underlying neurologic mechanisms, and the other word we use for that is human nature, and we can choose to violate it or we can choose to go with the flow on it. And I think going with the flow oftentimes will give you a better result. Again, back to the mirror neurons, monkey see, monkey do. You can't get much more basic than that. But if that's the case, then obviously that facilitates learning. Now, whether it developed as our cranium grew, or our cranium grew because that was there, what does it make a difference anymore? From a teaching point of view, maybe it suggests that rote memorization has its place.
Yeah, any kind of group setting, it seems, might benefit from a little of this psychological insight. But who knows? I guess we'll have to see. Well, if you want to go read Chuck's story, again, the title is Should Syncing Up Replace Hooking Up? And it's on our website, acsh.org. If you want to get these stories in your inbox, you just go to the top of our webpage, click to the subscribe button, put in your email address, and we will send you everything we publish right to your email. And then when you show up for this podcast, you go, hey, I know that story because I read it, and you'll be primed to learn a little bit more. So take advantage of that. And then follow us on social media. It's at ACSH.org. I am at CamJ Send us your questions, your comments, ideas for the show. If they're good, we will probably talk about them. If they're not good, then we're not. But we are interested in what you have to say. So thank you very much for joining us, and we will see you next time.